Hello everyone and welcome. In my last video I talked about the tashahhud and why it presents a problem for the Islamic concept of monotheism known as Tawheed. If you haven't watched my previous video, I recommend that you check it out before watching this video. But to summarize my previous video in a nutshell, Muslims basically pray to Muhammad, a man who has been dead and buried in Medina for the past 14 centuries, by speaking directly to him using second person pronouns in the middle of the tashahhud, a dua that they recite in their 5 daily prayers. Part of why I wanted to make that video was because Tawheed is a fundamental Islamic belief, and it's often used by Muslims in their dawah to non-Muslims, especially Christians, to bring them into the fold of Islam, and I wanted to show that Tawheed actually has its own flaws and inconsistencies that are very often downplayed by Muslims, but thanks to the internet making it easier for people to go through the books of Islam, we are now in a time and age where we can unveil the problems with Tawheed and unpack them for the masses, rather than just uncritically accepting the claims of Muslim da'is when they beat their own chests about how they are allegedly the true monotheists and that all religions, except for Islam, are idolatrous and polytheistic. From what I've noticed, Muslim da'is and apologists have a common tendency of being fault-finding when evaluating other religions by trying to poke holes in them and argue that they can't be of a divine origin because they dishonor God. For example, when Muslims have dialogues with Trinitarian Christians, they will go out of their way to poke holes with the logic of the Trinity, hypostatic union, and incarnation, and they experience a field day when critiquing these doctrines. In fact, they have so much fun poking holes in these doctrines that they will say that Christians believe that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. This, of course, is to be expected, because the Quran is a very polemical book that often chides the kuffar, i.e. non-Muslims, for their disbelief, so I am not surprised by how harsh and uncharitable they are in their critiques of other religions. This video will be a continuation of my critiques of Tawheed, and the problems that I have noticed with Tawheed. What I want to emphasize is that in my critiques, I will be examining Tawheed with the same level of scrutiny that Muslim polemicists employ when they critique the Trinity and other various religious beliefs that Jews, Christians, and other non-Muslims hold. I want everyone who is watching this to keep this in mind, because I believe that Muslims aren't used to having Tawheed scrutinized anywhere near to the extent that Christians are having the Trinity scrutinized, and it's about time that dissecting Tawheed becomes normalized. Now let's begin. At some point in Muhammad's life, there was an incident where a blind man came to Muhammad asking to be cured of his blindness, and Muhammad gives him some advice on how to get his blindness cured. It was narrated that Uthman bin Hunayf, that a blind man came to the Prophet and said, "Pray to Allah to heal me." He said, "If you wish to store your reward for the hereafter, that is better, or if you wish, I will supplicate for you." He said, "Supplicate." So he told him to perform ablution and do it well, and to perform 2 rakats and to say this supplication: "O Allah, I ask of you and turn my face towards you by virtue of the intercession of Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy. O Muhammad, I have turned to my Lord by virtue of your intercession concerning this need of mine, so that it may be met. O Allah, accept his intercession concerning me." A variation of the story in this hadith can also be found in Reliance of the Traveller, the classical manual of Islamic sacred law, a classical manual of fiqh for the Shafi school of thought within Islamic jurisprudence. Tirmidhi relates, through his chain of narrators from Uthman ibn Hunayf, that a blind man came to the Prophet and said, "I've been afflicted in my eyesight, so please pray to Allah for me." The Prophet said, "Go make ablution, perform 2 rakats of prayer, and then say, O Allah, I ask you and turn to you through my Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy. O Muhammad, I seek your intercession with my Lord for the return of my eyesight, and in another version, for my need that it may be fulfilled. O Allah, grant him intercession for me." The Prophet added, "And if there is some need, do the same." So that's basically how the incident went down. There are so many problems with Muhammad's advice to the blind man in this incident, and I was really shocked when I first read this story, because for years I was taught that Islam is the religion of pure, unadulterated monotheism. But Muhammad's advice to the blind man is so theologically problematic. The problem with Muhammad's advice starts with the fact that he specifically instructs the blind man to directly address Muhammad during his prayer, which is really unnecessary. Muhammad could have easily just told the blind man to simply ask Allah for the return of his eyesight on behalf of Muhammad or for Muhammad's sake. But rather than doing that, Muhammad literally instructs the blind man to speak directly to Muhammad using second-person pronouns whilst seeking Muhammad's intercession. The intercession in of itself isn't the problem. The problem is the wording and phrasing that Muhammad instructs the blind man to use in his prayer. Another problem is that Muhammad doesn't just instruct the blind man to directly address Muhammad using second-person pronouns, but that he also instructs the blind man to implicitly ask for Muhammad's help by telling him to say, "O Muhammad, I seek your intercession with my Lord for the return of my eyesight," during the prayer. This is even worse than the tashahhud, because in the tashahhud, a Muslim speaks directly to Muhammad, but doesn't go as far as asking Muhammad for help. But in this incident, Muhammad instructs the blind man to ask for Muhammad's help in the middle of a prayer to Allah. Muhammad's advice is in direct contradiction with Surah Fatiha, Ayah 5, which says, "Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een," which in English basically means, "It is you alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help." So Muhammad's advice in this incident literally contradicts the Quran, which makes his advice even worse. Another problem that I want to emphasize is that Muhammad instructs the blind man to ask for Muhammad's help in the same way he asked Allah for help whilst praying, by starting the prayer with, "O Allah, I ask you and turn to you through my Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy," and continuing the prayer with, "O Muhammad, I seek your intercession with my Lord for the return of my eyesight." The first sentence begins with "O Allah," and the second sentence begins with "O Muhammad," which are very interesting choice of words. What's even worse is that Muhammad also says, "And if there is some need, do the same," at the end of the incident, meaning that he endorsed this type of prayer, a type of prayer that includes all the aforementioned theological problems, whenever a Muslim has a problem. I don't think I need to explain any further how and why Muhammad's instructions to the blind man are theologically problematic. His instructions to the blind man clearly constitutes praying not only to Allah, but also praying to Muhammad. He instructs the blind man to use second-person pronouns by directly addressing Muhammad in the prayer. He instructs the blind man to ask for Muhammad's help. He asks the blind man to use language when directly addressing Muhammad that is suspiciously similar to the language that he uses when directly addressing Allah. Granted, Muslims might try to downplay this incident and explain it away by claiming that this took place when Muhammad was still alive, which by the way doesn't actually fix the aforementioned problems, but in case they do, here is a narration of a similar incident that took place after Muhammad's death. Moreover, Tabarini, in his Al-Mu'jam al-Saghir, reports a hadith from Uthman ibn Hunayf that a man repeatedly visited Uthman ibn Hunayf concerning something he needed, but Uthman paid no attention to him or his need. The man met Uthman Hunayf and complained to him about the matter, this being after the death of the Prophet, and after the caliphates of Abu Bakr and Umar. So Uthman ibn Hunayf, who was one of the companions who collected hadiths and were learned in the religion of Allah, said, "Go to the place of ablution and perform wuzu, then come to the mosque, perform 2 rakats of prayer therein, and say, O Allah, I ask you and turn to you through our Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy. O Muhammad, I turn through you to my Lord, that he may fulfill my need." According to this narration, this incident took place when Uthman was caliph, which is after Muhammad's death. Uthman gives instructions to a man that are very similar to the instructions that Muhammad gave, and this is when Muhammad has been dead for many years. So Muslims can't appeal to Muhammad being alive to rationalize this type of prayer. The fact that this type of prayer was endorsed by one of the Sahaba even after Muhammad's death makes this prayer even more baffling. None of this makes any sense if Islam is supposed to be the religion that brought monotheism back to its pure, unadulterated form. Now, of course, I know that Muslim apologists are going to use desperate apologetics to rationalize this prayer and explain how there's nothing wrong with it, since they aren't immune to cognitive dissonance, and they might accuse me of being uncharitable and malicious in my critique of this prayer. But I'm just examining this prayer with the same level of scrutiny that Muslim apologists take when they examine the Trinity, hypostatic union, incarnation, and religious beliefs of other non-Muslims. If Muslims are going to poke holes in other religious traditions with respect to the nature of God, then they should have no problem with non-Muslims like me doing the same to the Islamic tradition. Just imagine if a prayer like this existed within the Jewish or Christian tradition. If the Apostle Paul, for example, instructed people to speak directly to him and ask for his intercession during a prayer, Muslim da'is would be quick to accuse Paul of idolatry and polytheism, and they would have a field day with using this in their dawah to Christians as a gotcha moment. The truth is that Tawheed only makes sense when you examine it at a superficial level. Most people don't bother to examine Tawheed and simply accept the claims of Muslim da'is when they say that Islam is all about the worship of Allah alone. Muslim apologists don't realize that Tawheed has its own problems, but they fail to realize this due to their cognitive dissonance and double standards. What I have presented so far is just the tip of the iceberg. I do plan on making more videos with critiques of Tawheed in the future. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, and I hope you have a nice day.